welcome to the Elephant Room Podcast, a podcast where we'll try and explore the fantastically broad world of music, from reviews of new releases to universally considered masterpieces. Here are discussions and reflections on the future of music in an ever-evolving present, to the long and winding history of the format which brought us to what we know and love today. We'll touch on our own experiences within the world of music and perhaps even venture into musicology, storytelling, absurdity, comedy and philosophy along the way. So come join three self-proclaimed, opinionated musicians with nothing better to be doing in the current climate and embark on a journey through music with us.
Good evening, boys. Just to reiterate, we're doing this online, so if there's any glitches in how we're talking, it's because we're social distance on Google Meet. If they want to endorse us, it'd be fantastic.
We've got plenty of endorsements, Frank.
Yeah, they're not paying yet, though. That's the problem.
No.
Yeah. Are you all right?
Oh, yeah. Doing grand.
Nice long pause there.
Jesus Christ.
Left him stranded.
Strange times we live in here, but fucking hell, come on.
It's fantastic, guys. I love it.
Bit of enthusiasm here for episode 2. Come on.
I am really excited to be doing episode 2. I didn't think we'd get past episode 1.
Yeah, for anyone who's was listening last week or is listening to this first one as their first one, remember to like and share it around, and if you enjoy it, tell people about it.
Oh no. Just share the love, you know.
Just your ears.
Just keep listening.
So in the past week, I was looking at the 2 Rutles documentaries. If you've ever heard of them, Eric Idle. The Rutles. So Eric Idle in the 1970s had his own comedy show after Monty Python days called Rutland TV, which is just like a sketch show that was on British TV. But he had a recurring part called the Rutles, which was just based around the Beatles. Yeah, it was just these like small little sketches taking the piss out of the Beatles and stuff. And they did so well that in 1978 they did a really good movie. And the thing about Eric Idle is that he always kind of living in America and still lives in America to this day. So he was always very in with the American comics and Saturday Night Live and stuff like that. So the Rutles was his parody, kind of basically one of the first ever mockumentaries, and definitely the first like rockumentary before Spinal Tap, about the Rutles, who were the Beatles. And they do like a full chronological movie about the history, and Eric Idle plays Paul McCartney. Only they all have different names like Ron Nasty and it's just fucking hilarious. But the whole way through I was listening to the music, and the music is like really, really good parodies of Beatles songs. Yeah, they have like Hold My Hand, and like the chorus is like Please, Please Hold My Hand, which was like their breakthrough hit. But like they splice together like real footage of like and like it's proper Monty Python humor as well, with Eric Idle being like the presenter and narrator. The songs, I was like, Jesus, these are like really well written, really well recorded and stuff. And then the guy who plays John Lennon, or Ron Nasty, is a guy called Neil Innes. So he wrote all the songs. He was just like a really good musician friend of Eric Idle. And Innes was just such a good songwriter. He could just mimic the Beatles to a T, like their musicianship, their lyrics, their voices. Like he sounds very like Lennon himself. George Harrison's in the movie as just a reporter, and Mick Jagger's in the movie, John Belushi, and Bill Murray is in it as well.
Yes.
But it's really, really good. Look it up. It's fucking hilarious. And then they did a second one. So the one in 1978 was called All You Need Is Cash. And then they did like a short 10-minute one called Archaeology after the anthology came out in 96.
Fantastic.
And then in 2002 they did another really, really good one, which is like star-studded with like Dan Aykroyd and loads of people are in it, called Can't Buy Me Lunch.
Yeah.
But I was looking up about the music and the guy Inez who did it and stuff, and they had permission, obviously, from like George Harrison, and all 4 of the Beatles commented on it, saying that was hilarious. Even Lennon apparently went to see it in the cinema and stuff. Inez, who wrote it, had permission from the actual Beatles, but the Beatles' music at the time was owned by ATV Music, and they sued him for a soundtrack.
Oh, fucking hell.
And he had even hired a musicologist to like stand up for him in court, saying that parody can't be considered plagiarism if it's so blatantly a parody of something. You know, it's like, I wasn't trying to rip them off. It's like, it's me doing a joke version of the Beatles.
Yeah, which is how like a Weird Al Yankovic would get away with stuff like that. And, you know, nowadays it's acceptable.
But this is the difference, is Weird Al, who I looked into as well, he always asks permission from the artist personally, and then he'll run it past their copywriting people or his publishers and stuff like that. So he always gets permission. He makes sure, like, he had a good quote. It was like, he's not trying to stab someone in the back, he's trying to poke him in the ribs. Yeah, he got sued for the soundtrack. So the way they sorted it out is 50-50. He got 50% of the royalties for like his creative input of creating parody, and then 50% had to go to the Beatles, or to the Beatles company, the ATV Music. But all the other stuff he did after that, the 2002 and all the additional music that was done outside the movie, which did quite well, is all completely his. That led me on to another quote that I found from, it wasn't a musician, it was actually it was a woman who was in the Navy in America. She was one of the first Navy officers, female Navy officers. She had a really good quote. It's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an absolute tried and tested approach throughout anything in life.
Yeah, it just led me on to thinking about plagiarism and influence and different things like that.
That's something that I've been like thinking about for the last while, and I wanted to bring up for this kind of podcast because it's such a big kind of broad subject that you could probably talk about it for the whole podcast, but we won't. But is like influence, and like, what is influence? One good way to always kind of stop a musician in their tracks, and you this happens to us all the time. And how many times have you been at a gig when somebody comes up to you afterwards and they say, "Oh, I really like you guys. What are your influences?" And you start going, because you don't want a comparison to be drawn. You don't want to be pigeonholed. You don't want to be guys, "Oh, they're those guys. They sound like this," because then you're not being, original, and you're not kind of doing something new. Because obviously, then once you kind of get into music, you always want to be creating something new and make it fresh and obviously fun for yourself, but then something different for other people to listen to. I was just thinking about like the different sides of influence. It can be the thing that motivates you and gets you up and makes you want to play an instrument. It can be the thing, the norm is happening. What's the normal, mainstream is happening. And that might motivate you to do the complete opposite. You get things like grunge being a reaction to the 80s hair metal bands, and being the polar opposite to it in terms of ethics, dress sense, attitude, sound, music. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts and opinions on it, because we play in a band, we listen to lots of different types of music. And where do you think it comes into in your kind of musical output?
I think for myself, when you kind of pare back influence, just what you were saying there, Shane, like, what is influence, And, I think if you bring it back to the first principles of influence, you kind of you have inspiration, you've influence itself, and then you have motivation, So the way, like, a perfect example now, like, I know a lot of people who know me, including yourselves, obviously, people say, "Oh yeah, John Bonham." Ian absolutely loves John Bonham. He's his favorite drummer, like all that type of thing. But like, if I roll back to like what, when I first got into drums, from the inspiration point of view, hearing Led Zeppelin IV when the levee breaks, I was like, oh my God, the drums can actually sound like that, such a massive presence, it's like, it's truly awe-inspiring, like, it's like, I would love to do that. Yeah. And then comes the kind of influence part, where you start learning your instrument. You start hearing, John Bonham's various certain styles, the classic triplets, the heavy-handed playing, And then you've Dave Grohl as well. You know, like you've all the various different influences that I would, well, personally for me, I find your influences kind of near like a toolbox, you know, and it forms your personal toolbox that kind of shapes your style, you know.
Yeah.
And then comes the kind of motivation part in
For
terms
me,
of writing
that's
music.
exactly it. Like what you're saying there, like John Bonham, Led Zeppelin, that's your spark.
Yeah.
That's what gets you going, I'm going to play drums.
Absolutely. And I'm sure in terms of the kind of inspiration part, you know, the likes of yourself, Frank, you know, being a songwriter, you know, coming up with the actual melody or lyrics, like I'm sure there are points of inspiration for you rather than direct influences per se.
I always think with influences and stuff like that is you've got to have so many of them. And I think the best people that you find at making music and stuff like that are like people that are a bit too like hyperactive with how much they listen to stuff. And like that's kind of, I find the way I am, because like I can go and listen to someone like Saint Vincent for 2 weeks, and anytime I pick up a guitar I'm like, oh, I have to write a song like she writes one. That's amazing. I have to play the guitar in that certain way. I have to phrase lyrics that way and do that. And I write a bit of a rip off kind of guitar line that she does, and I kind of rip off a bit of a lyric thing. And what I've produced is a complete rip off of St. Vincent, but then I kind of leave that song there and I don't finish it, or it is there and it is kind of finished. Then 2 weeks after, I start listening to The Prodigy or something, and you go, Jesus, the fucking drum sound that they use, like the samples that they use. I'd love to do something with a massive big drum sound. And then you go and listen to some other vocalist and you go, geez, I love how they kind of do like a falsetto thing at the beginning of the verses. Or you go to listen to someone else, you go, geez, I love the fucking crazy too full-on distortion that those people use. By the time you go back to work on that song, you go, oh, that kind of St. Vincent rip-off one, I'm going to try that now with that bit of a falsetto thing I was thinking of. Or the second verse in that should have this big fuck-off drum sound on it. And then suddenly, I always feel like, oh shit, no, this was supposed to be a St. Vincent type song. And then you go, that was a few weeks ago. There's still traces of it in there, but then there's also this weird vocal inflection from Kurt Cobain, or there's this weird lyric play. That's the thing. You come to writing the lyrics in, and you're listening to Bob Dylan or something, and you start putting in like weird wordplay into it, and suddenly you've got this completely new song that has traces of St. Vincent, Kurt Cobain, Bob Dylan, The Prodigy, Radiohead, all these things. That's kind of, I think, the best people that you listen to as well. Because if you think of like someone like Kurt Cobain, his influences, you always hear like he was into Devo or Led Belly and stuff. And you go, what? That sounds nothing like fucking Nirvana. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then you hear why those people influence, and you go, fuck yeah, that's actually, that stuff actually, that's completely, you start to listen to someone like Devo and you go, he completely lifted that from them. That's genius. That's brilliant. So like, if you draw from it too much, that's saying, if you just get stuck in that 2 weeks of only listening to that same band and you go through the whole process, just broaden your horizons. I think you need that hyperactive music fan.
What you described there though is what's funny is like, say you are new to playing guitar, you start listening to the Chili Peppers, and then you fucking all you play is Chili's, and then you meet a guy who plays bass and all he listens to is Chili's, and then you end up with these guys that try to write new music and it just is Chili's. You know what I mean?
That's all they know.
Yeah, because that's all they know. But I really like that, what you're saying about that though. That's the good side, like, you know, taking from bits and pieces, and it's not necessarily taking because you're trying to put your own spin on it all the time. But then the other side of it is the likes of bands then that you hear about that are just blatant rip-offs of things. And when we were talking about this before, we were saying how that is just a product of the machine taking something that used to be popular and it's kind of been forgotten about, and if we reintroduce it, people are like, oh yeah, I used to love that kind of music, and I used to, you know, prime example of it that we've been talking about is like Greta Van Fleet and their comparisons to Led Zeppelin, and just how they are basically the exact same sounding band, you know.
But that's the thing it comes from, though. I think if you grow up just listening to the Chili Peppers and then you meet a bass player and you go, geez, we have so much in common. You only like the Chili Peppers too, or you only like that. That's basically what those that's how Greta Van Fleet would have started. Would it just be a young guy who just listened to Robert Plant? Then he meets a guitar player who only listened to Jimmy Page. They go, gee, we should start writing songs together. And they're obviously just going to sound like Led Zeppelin. And then they get really good. They basically become this really, really solid 70s rock band. And then someone will hear them and go, fuck, I could sell that, because the Led Zeppelin fan base is massive. And people, I think it's, guitars are set for a bit of a revival now. Yeah. I remember when Kings of Leon came out in 2003, me and a guy I knew were like, these guys are class. They only listen to like the band and like 70s stuff, and their guitars aren't tainted by this horrible new metal guitar sound. These guys are great.
I remember the exact same way.
So that's basically how people feel about Greta Van Fleet. Because imagine if you're a young guy and all you listen to, imagine you're 13, 14 and all you listen to is Zeppelin. Yeah. And then you hear these other guitar stuff and you go, oh, I just want to listen to Zeppelin. There's no good bands out there like Zeppelin anymore. And then you hear Greta Van Fleet and you're like, oh, there is. Yes. Yes, there's another band out there like Zeppelin.
The first time I heard Kings of Leon, I genuinely thought I was on like VH1 70s rock. I thought I'd stumble on like an old band. I didn't know that they were happening right now.
But that's it. I'm sure there's older, wiser people at the time that were just going, oh, they're just a fucking rip-off, aren't they? Yeah. Of Creedence or something like that. I can't really see. I think it was the genius of Ethan Johns and his
definitely
family experience of the 70s that made them so unique and actually good. But like that was the first kind of retro revival, that kind of early noughties, Kings of Leon, even the White Stripes.
Even Fleet Foxes to an extent, Crosby, Stills, Nash. Because I remember at the time, like I was a massive Fleet Foxes fan, and I'd still dip into them. And I remember there was this girl at home, an older and wiser girl, and I was just saying, Fleet Foxes are amazing, and she was like, just another Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And I was like, Crosby, Stills, and who? So it's like, she's like, go home, listen to Deja Vu. I listened, I was like, oh God. You're right.
We'll always bring back retro sounding stuff, and it will always happen, especially now with the internet, because there's a market for it. Before it was like conquer new ground, don't look back, conquer new ground, don't look back. But now it's like, you know what, I only like this music, so I'm just going to listen to all the new music that's made like that. There's plenty of I know a lot of guys that are like older than us in their 40s, 50s. They could not be bothered. Even if the internet never came along, they would have just listened to their classic rock and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you meet these guys, Frank? These older guys? Was that when you're down the Boom Boom's room again?
They turn up on my algorithm.
Yeah. They're 40-year-old single men near you.
Yeah. Soviet Russia.
Yeah, just my Soviet Russian chat rooms, forums. But you can't convince those type of people. If you go, oh man, you got to listen to like kind of electronic music, it has punk attitude, they go, nah, not interested. But if you go, oh, look at this Greta Van Fleet band, they go, finally someone who gets it. These guys get it. Whereas I see that as like a creative person who likes original type music. I'm just like, oh, they've done nothing to this. They're offering nothing new to the system here. Fuck them. But there's a market for them.
Well, I think that's a very important thing to be thinking about when you are. I think if you're a musician and you're listening to this, or if you're just a fan of music and you're listening to, you're thinking now of the music you listen to. I think being original and that's the most unique thing you can do, is just try to be your own set of things, create your own set of rules for how you're going to create your music or write your songs, and not try to be influenced by other things. It can be just as good an exercise as trying to pull things from different pieces.
At Prosecco Life Insurance, we're here for you and your loved ones to offer our services on coverages like will writing and funeral costs, but with a smile. So if you're in the financial bracket that you can actually afford our services, we'll make sure that your loved ones get a little bit of something after our fees when you're dead. Don't worry, the pain of losing you will be greeted with a nice, warm smile. Prosecco Life Insurance, here for you, waiting for your money with a smile.
Great record.
Excellent album. We learned a lot from
Great
it.
record.
And we're back. This week's classic album, which is going to be brought to you by Ian, is from the 1970s. But 1970 in particular, which I think was a fairly important year because that's when Janis Joplin and Hendrix died. And it was also when the 60s died and became the 70s. But I think it's quite a big transition. And I think the album that Ian is going to talk about is almost like a passing of the torch from like the 60s and the Beatles being the biggest band of the 60s, and then Zeppelin possibly going on to be the most important band of the 70s. Would you agree with that, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I think that's a really good analogy. Like, I mean, we had in our first episode, Let It Be, kind of the final hurrah from the Beatles, really, you know. And now we're on to Led Zeppelin, the era of Zeppelin. So 1970 saw the release of Led Zeppelin III. As the name suggests, it's their third album. Actually released this month. It was the 5th of October 1970. So we're nearly bang on the money with the 50-year anniversary. So this album, it kind of went slightly off on a segue, you know, in terms of Led Zeppelin and the sound they've kind of established from Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. It's like the first two albums, they're very much kind of blues, hard rock, you know, the first album being a perfect crossover from blues to rock, and the second album, you know, being viewed by so many, you know, contemporary critics and, you know, kind of looking back, the kind of start of heavy metal, you know, or proto metal, you know, along with Black Sabbath and stuff. So III, I think it was a product of, you know, Page in particular, Jimmy Page kind of spurred this, that at the time you had the emergence of, you know, Crosby, Stills and Nash. You know, you had Neil Young. You kind of had this soft kind of folk rock element developing across the pond. So Page was fairly acutely aware of that. So he didn't want to do just another straight up rock album, you know. So this was where he started to look at, as we just touched on, influences and different kind of sources of inspiration. So a big one for him was kind of looking at the Scottish folk artists of the kind of late 60s. And into 1970, obviously. So you had the likes of Bert Jansch, which was a massive influence on Page acoustically. And you had Davy Graham as well. I think he was famous for making dadgad tuning a big thing in folk. But that played a massive influence, and we'll see it now in the tracks in Led Zeppelin 3 when we go through it. And then also you had English folk, the likes of Roy Harper, who was instrumental in the whole English folk scene. And again, they literally tipped the hat to Roy Harper at the end. Hats off to Roy Harper, the track. And then, so you had those elements of kind of Scottish folk, English folk, and then throw in the blues and kind of rock element. And you have this very unique album, I think, you know. So basically they kind of first unleashed it to the public at the Bath Festival in 1970, in June 1970. So it's just before they released it, a few months before. And they debuted That's the Way. So that's one of the big acoustic numbers off it. So it's the actual first time since Zeppelin started touring that they played an acoustic number. So this was like, oh my God, you know, like, where are they at? You know, heavy Led Zeppelin. So it apparently went down like a storm at Bath, and they enjoyed it. And then sure, they played their Immigrant Song and all that. So they kind of brought it back to rock. But they kind of got, you know, they got mixed reviews at the time. I think their kind of standard fanship, I think they took it on anyway, because you had the classics like the rock hitters of the Immigrant Song, Out in the Tiles. You've that classic Since I've Been Loving You blues, you know. And then you had the kind of folk element as well with the rest of the album. So I think the fans kind of liked it, but critics were quite harsh. Like you had headlines that Zeppelin goes soft on fans, you know, stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, so the actual album itself, it's the first time we actually see the use of Headley Grange. So are you aware of Headley Grange?
Tell me about it.
Studio.
Yeah. So but basically it was a former workhouse. And because it was a former workhouse, obviously an absolute massive building, had a real cavernous hallway. And that's where we got the classic When the Levee Breaks sound in Led Zeppelin 4. But before, obviously, they went on to Led Zeppelin 4. It was a recommendation from one of their sound engineers to go and check this place out that Fleetwood Mac already recorded in there in late 69. So Page and Plant rocked up, checked it out. They actually rented the Rolling Stones mobile studio for it. So that's a nice bit of a tip in the hat to them. But yeah, so that's the first time they used Headley Grange. They also used a nice little cottage in Wales called Bronyer R, where they actually wrote most of the songs, and they did a few rough takes in there as well. Apparently it was a kind of holiday home that Robert Plant went to with his family for years, and himself and Page just kind of went on a break there after Led Zeppelin II, and it's where they kind of found their love of folk, you know. So you had those kind of elements there, and they brought it into the studio. So really, in terms of track listing, you know, you have this big opener, the Immigrant Song, you know, like this brings it back, proper straight up rock Led Zeppelin, everyone knows, you know. So it kind of gets you in like, oh yeah, this is Led Zeppelin, this is what we know. But then the next song, Friends, you know, which is a complete curveball. It's, you know, brand new sound. And I think that's one of your favorites, Frank, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the only Led Zeppelin album I had like growing up. But I thought it was like the perfect mixture of rock and acoustic of like what Zeppelin was about. Obviously Zeppelin 4 is probably a better one, but like for me, only listening to that one. And then the way Friends used the Moog synth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the string section and that kind of Indian sound with it. Like it's acoustic, but Jesus Christ, it's still in your face. Like, and just I think that's very kind of like what Led Zeppelin were kind of in many ways of just, as I said, the Beatles passed the torch onto them of kind of being the band who are going to push the boundaries for the 70s. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And then when you know do you actually, you know, the transition from Friends and Celebration Day, you have that
the Moog,
the really cool Moog, you know, it's like, God, that's class. But if you kind of look back, you know, if you take a step back and go, God, that's a bit random, why the hell did they do that? So apparently, you probably noticed, Frank, but apparently at the very start of Celebration Day, they did have an intro worked out, and it was, well, they thought it was recorded, and there was an error in their tape. Basically the post-production, they wiped a part of the tape. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's why. Now it works incredibly well. You know, wow.
I thought that would have been very thought out. I thought that was because with the Moog synth, it's like if you ever work on segueing songs when you're recording, it ends on a completely different key. So he like detunes it down to be the key of Celebration Day.
Yeah. But isn't that mad? And then you're kind of back to slight more familiarity there. Since I've Been Loving You, you know, it kind of goes back to their Led Zeppelin 1 roots, you know. Actually, Since I've Been Loving You, that was originally recorded during the Led Zeppelin 2 sessions. But then obviously out in the tiles, then it's a bit more coming back to rock. But then the whole kind of the next 5 tracks, you know, the next side essentially, I think it's just a fantastic new kind of sound of folk, you know, a bit of traditional blues and rock, and it's such unique. Like you've Gallows Pole, which is originally a Leadbelly song, you know, real straight up Delta blues type thing, and they make that into, you know, like an English folk rock song, you know. Tangerine was actually originally from Yardbird sessions, way back, like even before Led Zeppelin. Apparently it was an unfinished track that Page was working on at the time, and they never used it.
What I find is so cool about those acoustic tracks though is that they're folk influenced. If you want to talk about influence again, they're folk influenced, but the fact that they're so detuned and in a weird tuning and played in like an aggressive way.
A very interesting fact with one song that for absolute years I just thought was an absolute straight up folk song with a bit of a kind of, you know, nice little honky tonky twist, kind of the rhythm of it, like Bronyer or Stomp. Just after That's the Way, like apparently I can't really hear it, but I'm sure you can, Frank, being a guitarist, and Shane as well. Like apparently that started life out with Jimmy Page on full electric trying to do Hendrix runs, so kind of Jimi Hendrix style runs on the guitar. Now I can't really hear it at all, like it's so far removed from it.
That's very strange because I was listening to that song. I was like, Jesus, isn't it mad the way a guitar player that you primarily know for the electric guitar, and when you hear them play the acoustic guitar, it's similar. And you can still hear the right hand come out and stuff like that. You can still hear the strumming patterns and stuff like that. A bit like Neil Young, like the difference between his acoustic and electric playing.
I instantly thought of Neil Young once you started talking about that, like just his kind of steady right hand rhythmic picking. Yeah.
Listen to Jimmy Page, I was like, Jesus, it's kind of weird that he plays the acoustic guitar almost like how Hendrix plays an electric guitar.
Right. Okay. So
I genuinely never knew that.
Well, see, there you go. So, like again, I just for years I just thought, yeah, it was a nice, cool, upbeat, folky thing. But yeah, there you go. You knew that. You could hear that kind of Hendrix style, and then obviously the final track is hats off to the whole kind of folk thing. It's like, thanks to the likes of Roy Harper and also to the other influences for, opening Page's eyes to this, But I honestly, I think looking back, it's one of their most original albums. But just a bit of a note on the sleeve design, possibly one of the most iconic and famous sleeves ever. And it was designed by 60s multimedia artist Zacron. Obviously, it had this fantastic spinning wheel at the front, where you had different images of the band showing up in these little windows, along with different little motifs. It's actually, the overall motif was flight, if you notice. So you had butterflies, you had little planes, you had all that, Like I had my first pressing on there, last night, just, getting into the zone and all that. And sure didn't I just cop that original spinning wheel in the gatefold is missing. It's gone. So
yeah, well, that's to say, I have like original Sgt. Pepper, so it doesn't have any of the mustaches or anything in it.
Yeah. They released a Japanese version, or a Japanese pressing with artwork and that of the Immigrant Song, and its B-side, which is very rare for a lot of bands. I think back in the day, their B-side didn't feature in the album at all. It was completely a brand new one-off recording, like actually recorded as a B-side for the single. And it's Hey Hey What Can I Do? It's on Coda, Coda, the final album. It's on that, but as a 50th anniversary special, they've actually re-released this Japanese 7-inch pressing of Immigrant Song and Hey Hey What Can I Do? And there's only 19,700 pressings, and yes, of course, I have pre-ordered it.
The family connection between last week with Let It Be is that Zeppelin III was engineered and mixed, obviously produced by Jimmy Page, but engineered and mixed by Andy Johns.
Ah, yes.
Who's the brother of Glenn Johns, who did the original mixes of Let It Be.
And Glenn Johns worked on Led Zeppelin II.
And the other connection is that, what was it, Zacron?
Yes,
that did the artwork.
Zacron, yeah.
He went to art college with Eric Clapton.
Well, look, we won't hold that against him, Frank. Okay.
Yeah, I think that should be a connection every week. We bring up that fucking guitar charlatan every week.
Ned O'Connell here of O'Connell Connects, bringing you the fastest interweb across the countryside. Our introductory offer, a 5 megabyte broadband download upload speed per minute of only €79.99. And also on offer, our deluxe bundle of terrestrial, super satellite, sonic wave, TV and internet for only €150 per month. O'Connell Connects, bringing the interweb to you.
Shane, what's the longest song you've ever listened to?
Ordinary People by Neil Young. It's like 16 minutes long.
That ranks. I think it's 18 minutes.
18 minutes.
So 18 minutes is pretty long, but what would you think about 639 years?
What?
This is a John Cage song, the mad bastard from the 20th century. Died there in 93. Yeah, I think it was 93. Hopefully I've got that right. But he did all kinds of avant-garde stuff, just like silence, prepared piano, the pop face of avant-garde music in the 20th century. Yeah, so he wrote a piece in 1987 that I think he performed only like twice, and every time he performed it, it was about 20, 40 minutes long. But it was called Organ Squared, ASLAP, which stands for Organ Squared as Slow as Possible. So he wrote a score and he just wrote ASALP instead of, forte or all these sort of speeds. Yeah, just play it as slow as you can. After he died, a few other people had done it and they went on for like 2 days, 3 days or something like that. So they decided as a tribute to him in 2001 in Halberstadt in Germany, in this old little restored church, that they were going to get an organ that they were going to weigh down the pieces with sandbags and they were going to play it for 639 years.
That's pretty fucking cool, to be honest.
Why would they not just push it out to 640?
It's mathematically how long the pauses are in the music and stuff
fantastic.
like that. It's so it started on John Cage's birthday on the 5th of September in 2001. But it started out with a rest that lasted until the 5th of February 2003. So it started with a 2-year rest with just silence. And then finally in 2003, it played its first chord, which lasted until the 5th of July 2003. There was a note change on the 5th of September, his birthday again, just gone by, 2020.
Weirdly enough.
Fantastic.
It's gotten to a point now that whenever there's a chord change, people flock to the church to see it happening because they have to gently move. Like there's a purpose-built organ, like this wooden organ. Like it's not like a normal organ. It's just these wooden bars that come out from that release the sound to go up through the pipes. So it's quite a big ordeal when they have to change the sandbags over and change it to.
It's like the Book of Kells when they turn a page.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, only way less frequent.
Yeah.
The chord change there on the 5th of September was the first one since 2013. So that was 7-year gap. So it was quite a big thing. And it got fucked up because fucking coronavirus. Nobody could go and see it.
So,
oh shit.
Is it constantly playing, Frank?
Constantly. So you can go and visit that church.
Yeah.
And it's in, because it's noisy. It's a drone.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's a glass box put around it to basically keep this out when you're in the church. And apparently it's quite an amazing thing to do for like people who love spatial audio and stuff like that, because it sounds different in different wings of the church, because it's a completely empty church. It's a restored kind of ruin. No person that comes and listens to this over its 639 years will have the same experience. Yeah, you'll have the same chord, but like it'll be a different world outside. It's due to end in 2040 or 2640.
Wow.
This isn't the work of art for any sort of pretentious sort of thing, because this we have to trust that people are going to still do this. The people that started it are going to be long dead. The next note goes off on the 5th of February 2022. So make sure that you're in Halberstadt in Germany for that.
Sure, we'll all be vaccinated by then.
Can't wait.
Just to be a fucking nerd and to be queer interesting, I thought about like the future. What the fuck is the world going to look like in 2640? That's a long time away. So in comparison, what did the world look like 639 years ago? So 639 years ago, strangely enough, the Black Plague was going on in Europe.
Oh, wow.
So it got me thinking. I was like,
how times have changed.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking. I was like, I wonder what pandemic is going to be ravaging the earth when it ends.
Some fucking alien-born disease.
That was happening in 1400. Like, that's how long ago. Basically, imagine right now there was a song ending that had started when the Ming Dynasty had started, when the Black Plague was going on, or when the Western Schism, the Papal Presidency. And I mainly wanted to get that one in because I bet you no one saw that this music podcast was going to mention the Western Papal Schism.
1, 2. Oh, Athenry cream pie. Bring tears to your eyes. Athenry cream pie. Athenry cream pie. Since I was a young boy, I always loved cream pies. I'd ate them every day to bring tear to your eye. Athenry cream pie, cream pie. Athenry cream pie, cream pie. Word to your mother.
The Elephant Room recommends.
So, Ian, why don't you tell us, what do you recommend this week?
Well, an absolute excellent follow-on from Frank's Queer Interesting. I think I would like to recommend Lancome, The Livelong Day. So that's their most recent 2019 album. No, but just, obviously they've such a fantastic crossover between, you've kind of trad folk meeting kind of drone music, essentially, this very deep, dark kind of cavernous sound they can get. It's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, no, I'd recommend Lancome.
I have been listening to a lot of strange 60s stuff. A band called, I think everyone knows, like a Shocking Blue, who did Love Buzz and Venus.
Yeah.
I was listening to them. They've got some, apart from Venus and Love Buzz, they have some pretty freaky stuff. Cool guitar player. They're from the Netherlands. And then the other big band from then that I just find fascinating are Silver Apples.
Oh, yeah.
Who were basically doing electronic music before other people were doing electronic music. But yeah, they got their name from W.B. Yeats' poem, The Song of the Wandering Angus. He mentioned silver apples in that. Basically, the main guy, Simone Cox, he created this machine. He was just obsessed with electronic devices. So he got like 9 audio oscillators and stuck them all together, old kitchen appliances, and manipulated them. And he eventually came up with this thing that was just like a big massive desk full of knobs, and he'd like use his elbows and his feet and everything to create the sounds, and like looped drum beats and stuff like that. And then the singer was Danny Taylor, who was like a New York poet at the time. Basically, he tried to be in bands with this big fucking device that he'd made, the Simone, and drummers and bass players and guitar players would just get so pissed off with how long it took him to set up and do his thing that they used to just be like, fuck you, man, I don't want to be in a band with you anymore. So he was like, how can I just loop their drum sounds? I don't need a drummer. I'll just loop the sounds. I'll just loop the bass sounds. So basically it was just like, he said, like in interviews, he was like, I never thought I was like creating electronic music or breaking waves or anything like that, or creating this new thing. I just wanted to try to do everything myself because no one wanted to play with me.
Did the Simone, sorry Frank, did the Simone evolve completely independently from, let's say, Dr. Robert Moog's?
So this is the funny thing. This is actually a really nice fact. When he was in the studio recording their first album, there were so many people talking about how fucking weird it sounded and his device, the Simone, that Robert Moog actually came to the studio to look at it.
Oh, brilliant.
Hendrix was recording next door, and before Electric Ladyland and stuff was established, he was recording next door, and he was so fascinated by them. The two of them actually jammed Star Spangled Banner together.
Oh wow! Is there a recording of that at all? The bootleg?
Apparently there is. I can't find it, but apparently they did record that together, and that's what then influenced Hendrix to play it at Woodstock, because he was, your man Simone's trying to do this weird electronic looped version of it. And then Hendrix was like, light bulb moment, kind of like, they recorded their second album, which they were hoping would kind of break them through to a wider audience or into England and stuff like that. Their record label, or their publishing label, was also the same publishing company for Pan Am. Trying to save on money, they just went, your next album cover should be, you should get Pan Am in there, and we'll do a bit of double advertising. So they were like, okay, yeah, we can work that in. So they arranged that the cover of their second album was going to be them in the cockpit of a Pan Am plane. So they went and they did that, and they took the picture of them sitting in the cockpit, and it said Pan Am up in the corner. The guy who was doing the art got a bit carried away with himself, and for the back cover, he put a picture of the band sitting in front of a plane crash. Jesus. A plane that was like shattered in bits, and obviously this was going to go to press, and it was getting printed and stuff. And Pan Am were like, "Not a fucking chance! You're not putting our name on a plane crash."
Start freaking out.
It just got pulled, and it never got picked up by anyone else, and that was the end of them.
Jeez.
And like one of the guys ended up living in Alabama and owning like a cider farm. But yeah, that's my room recommends anyway. Weird 60s stuff.
And I suppose to finish off this week, I've been mostly listening to Leanne Lahaves. Lahaves.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know how to say her last name. So I've showed her to you guys. Basically, really simple to find on Spotify if you want to go listen to her, because the album is of the same name, so you'll find her straight away. If you're a Radiohead fan, she does a really good cover of Weird Fishes. Weird Fishes, that song, off of their In Rainbows album. And it's just really smooth, well recorded, really crisp sounding R&B. She's a really good voice. Bittersweet is a good tune to start off with. I
absolutely love that track.
And Hide and Seek is another really good one that you should check out. But it's kind of what I like about it from being kind of different from your normal R&B is it's not sample based, it's all instrument based. So there's a drummer drumming, a keyboard playing keys, somebody playing bass, somebody playing guitars, and it all works really, really well. So yeah, go check it out.
Shall we blow it up?
Oh yeah, we blow it up there now by...
Nice one.
Cool. Thanks for listening, guys. Follow, like, share. I'm not saying that again, so just do it.